Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible stories in human history, the story of how we've tried to understand the mind itself. It's a wild ride, a path that literally goes from drilling holes in skulls to mapping the circuits of the brain. So let's get into it. Okay, so to start, we have to ask a really fundamental question. How do we even decide what's psychologically abnormal? Where's the line between just being a unique personality and having a disorder? It's a tricky question, right? And it's one that people have been wrestling with for centuries. So how do we draw that line now in the modern world? Well, today, clinicians have this really practical toolkit they call the 4Ds. It's basically a framework, a way to systematically figure out if a certain behavior or feeling has crossed over into something that might be classified as a disorder. Let's break those down. The first two Ds are deviance and distress. Now, deviance just means straying from what society considers the norm. Think of it as behavior that's pretty unusual or extreme. Distress, on the other hand, is all about what's going on inside, that personal, often painful suffering that a person feels. And the last two are dysfunction and danger. Dysfunction is pretty straightforward. It's when a behavior starts getting in the way of daily life, making it hard to go to work, to keep up with friends, or even just take care of yourself. And danger, well, this one is important. We often jump to associating mental illness with being dangerous, but the reality is, it's actually the exception, not the rule. So yeah, these 4Ds give us a pretty clear, structured way to think about all this. But, and this is a huge but, we have to remember that this kind of clarity is a very, very recent thing. For most of human history, the way we understood the mind was a whole lot darker and more confusing. Let's go back in time.
Our story kicks off in the ancient world, a time when the reasons for strange behavior weren't thought to come from inside a person, but from way, way outside.
When you look at a timeline like this, you can see our understanding has basically swung like a giant pendulum. For centuries, we've just been bouncing back and forth between two main ideas. Either mental illness is caused by supernatural forces, or the answer lies somewhere inside the human body itself. Way back in prehistoric times, the dominant belief was that evil spirits were the culprits, and this led to some pretty extreme treatments. Like trephination, that's the practice of drilling a hole straight into a person's skull. The idea was to create a little doorway for the evil spirit trapped inside to get out. Then along come the ancient Greeks and Romans, and with them a totally revolutionary shift in thinking. A guy named Hippocrates was one of the first to really push back against the whole evil spirits idea. He proposed something truly radical for the time. What if this isn't a demon, but a disease? He argued it was caused by physical problems, an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids that he called the humors. But that progress didn't last. With the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe was plunged into the Dark Ages, and that pendulum swung right back. Demonology returned, and it returned with a vengeance. The church basically took over, blaming demons and witchcraft for mental illness. Treatments like exorcism, which could be incredibly brutal, became the go-to solution. So as these ideas kept shifting, a new kind of place was created, specifically to house people with mental illness. The asylum. The big question, though, is were they sanctuaries or something else entirely? The reality of the first asylums was, honestly, a nightmare. Just look at London's Bethlehem Hospital. It got so famous for its chaos and cruelty that its nickname, Bedlam, literally became a word in the English language for chaos. And get this, you could pay money, buy a ticket, to go and gawk at the patients, like it was a human zoo. But in the middle of all that darkness, a real change started to happen, thanks to reformers like Philippe Pinel over in France. He saw these horrific conditions and championed an idea that was, at the time, mind-blowing, that these patients weren't monsters, they were human beings, and they deserved compassion. Pinel's work kicked off what's called the moral treatment movement, and for a while, it was like a golden age, where asylums actually tried to be places of healing and kindness. But tragically, it didn't last. The asylums got overcrowded, they lost their funding, and the whole model just collapsed. Sound familiar? It's a problem we're still grappling with in mental health care today. All right, let's jump forward to the 20th century. This is where the scientific method really starts to take over, bringing us much closer to the way we think about things today. A huge, game-changing moment was the creation of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. For the very first time, this book gave doctors and therapists a common language, a shared set of criteria to actually diagnose disorders. It was a massive step in moving psychopathology into the world of science. And then, boom, another massive revolution hit in the 1950s, psychotropic medications. We're talking about the first antipsychotics and antidepressants that could actually help manage symptoms. This led to this huge wave of deinstitutionalization, and the numbers are just staggering. The number of people in public mental hospitals dropped by 79%, from almost 600,000 down to about 125,000 today. All of this history brings us right here, to the modern view. We've moved past the idea that there's one single cause for mental illness. Instead, we use what's called the integrative approach, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We now know it's not just your biology or just your thoughts or just what's happening in your life. It's all of it. Your biology, your behavior, your emotions, your social world, all interacting in this complex web. So we've come a long, long way from demons and drills. But for this final part of our story, we have to ask a challenging question. How much of that ancient history is still with us? You'd think so, wouldn't you? It's pretty easy for us to sit here and assume that beliefs in demonic possession and supernatural causes for illness are just, well, history. They're things we read about in books. But are they? What's really startling is when you realize you can draw a bold, straight line connecting those ancient views directly to things happening right now, in our time. And this isn't some abstract debate. Look at this news report from 2013. It's about a teenage girl who had malaria. Her doctor allegedly used faith healing to try and get rid of what he called a supernatural soul, delaying actual medical treatment. The girl died. It's a heartbreaking, modern example of these ancient beliefs having truly devastating consequences. And so that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Our scientific understanding of the mind and body is advancing at an incredible pace. But how do we bridge the gap between that modern science and these deeply rooted cultural and spiritual beliefs that have been around for thousands of years? That right there remains one of the biggest challenges we face in mental health all across the globe.